Hello, and welcome to Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble. We're glad to have you back. Today I have Akshay Madhani with me. He is the CEO of a Scrollmark, and they are into organic social community growth. And we're going to learn a lot from Akshay today about his business. Welcome, Akshay. I'm glad you're joining us here on Open Pathways today.
Tom, it's great to be here with you.
So I'd like to ask you a few questions today and get started with one that I'm really interested in is what inspired you to start Scrollmark?
That's a great question. I think, you know, when we started, I think one of the inspirations for why I kind of started this company was my work at Facebook with top fans. Now I was an engineer at Facebook for many years, worked on many different things, but the Pages team working on the top fans product is really where I think I flourished there. And what the top fans part was that if you kind of commented a ton on a specific celebrity or page that you were a fan of, you'd get a notification being like, hey, you're a top fan. So let's say like I comment like 5 times a month on Taylor Swift's page, I'll get a notification being like, hey, you're a top fan of Taylor Swift. Come here and claim your badge. The next time I go and comment on Taylor Swift's page, there'll be a little badge next to my name saying, hey, you're a top fan of Taylor Swift. And I think one of the things I realized there was that, people kind of went crazy for these badges. I remember like one time the system broke and we didn't give out our badges this one week and everyone was like, where did my badge go? I used to be a top fan and where did it go? And I was like, I mean, this doesn't really give you anything. There's no monetary value. There's no like, it's not even like, Taylor Swift even knows this is happening for what it's worth. Like the page knows. It's something we kind of just turned on in the background. The page can turn it off if they so choose, obviously, and there was like a ton of control there, but it's not like they were kind of giving you any sort of shout out or anything like that. And I was like, wow, like just recognizing these people and seeing that like they care a ton about this page and just letting them know that we see that they care so much that makes such a huge difference to this community. And I kind of realized that, hey, there's a ton that can be done to grow businesses by using the community that's already loving you, already kind of advocating for you out in the wild, engaging with you on social. And that's kind of where Scrollmark started.
I love it. I think we all want to be a top fan, and I suspect some of those people thought Taylor Swift knew they were a top fan, and that she was saying that to them. I love that idea of how we get people, users to respond to these kinds of functionality that we add. I'm interested to know about your background before you started with Scrollmark. I know you shared that you were with Facebook, but tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, and worked at a couple of kind of larger tech companies. Worked at LinkedIn, worked at PayPal, kind of was an engineer, graduated from UC Berkeley from the electrical engineering computer science department. So I really spent most of my life as an engineer. I think I was always more product focused, really thinking about, hey, like how how does this specific thing that we're building solve a user need, and how are people kind of going to respond to it? I think a really funny anecdote from early in my career was um, when I started at Facebook, I was like 20 years old, right? And we went through this like team matching process, and one of the teams that was looking for engineers was the youth team, right? Which was building products for kind of the segment of like teens in like US and Canada, these developed countries. And I was like, hey, that was me 2 years ago, right? Like, so I joined that team, and it was a really cool experience because, they often kind of talked to me a ton about just getting a vibe check on the products that they were building and the way that maybe teens might perceive it. Um, and I think as I've kind of gone on in my career, I think it's important to use differentiated user interviews as well as data to kind of take personal bias out of the equation and understand how people are going to respond to specific things, right? But I think starting from a place of intuition is always really powerful, especially as a founder when, obviously you talk about Facebook is really easy to get data at like a massive scale, right? Like, but when you're a founder and you don't have that resource, you have to kind of start with intuition and then kind of follow it up with, interviews and data and this and that.
Yeah, I remember early on in Facebook for the folks that we hired that were under 21, and I think there was probably more then than there were when you were there. There was always a big deal of what we shielded you from. I thought it was always kind of comical. I'm sure you had that experience too.
Oh man, no, I think before I was 21, I was working on like some basically like pornography detection and reporting and this and that. And I was like, this is very interesting to be working on at this age.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Back in the day, we were doing that content moderation all in-house before it started going out-house. It was definitely, we'll just call it enlightening.
All right.
I'm curious, what obstacles did you face early on when you started to launch in the early days of Scrollmark? What were some of the obstacles that happened and how'd you overcome them?
Oh man, we kind of actually saw that I think the biggest challenge was kind of trying to kind of reach out to companies and convince them to maybe take on marketing in this new form, right? Like if you think about like social marketing traditionally, it's very much a broadcast channel, right? Like you're posting on Instagram, you're posting on Facebook. You're maybe if you have an influencer marketing team, you're reaching out to influencers who are then kind of doing the same thing, right? Um, and it was challenging to go to these teams and be like, hey, listen, like, you know, I guess before I go there, a bit of background on the platform. One of the things that we do is we take engagement and then we turn it into DM funnels, right? So like let's say somebody comments on a post, we'll kind of send them a DM after that comment being like, hey, thank you for your comment. Mind if we get your email? And by the way, we'll give you like 20% off. The same way that you could see a website pop up do the same thing, right? Um, Now, that's a very life cycle marketing type of a flow. That's very new to a social team. So convincing them to kind of take on this new form of marketing almost is was challenging, right? Nobody really wants to be the first to do something, right? So one of the ways that we solved that was by actually kind of creating some very standardized flows and giving them almost a guarantee of this is what you're going to get out of it, right? So an example of this is like for a few companies who had like decent followings, but they were struggling with engagement on their socials, which is very common because like a lot of these companies started in the era of like I guess ranked by like last posted feed, right? Like unranked feeds basically, right? And they were so used to, hey, if I have a big name and I get a ton of following, I'm gonna get a lot of engagement on my post no matter what I post. And then as soon as like Facebook and Instagram started to introduce these ranked feeds, they got like downranked to hell because their content was not that interesting, right? So I said, all right, like this is how we kind of get your content to be engaging again. We kind of posted a giveaway once every 2 weeks, right? We're like, we're gonna put you on this plan that we're gonna post a giveaway once every 2 weeks. If somebody engages with you, we're gonna collect their email. So that way the social team is delivering a ton of emails to the life cycle team. You're delivering a lot of value to the entire marketing team that way. And also you're able to kind of boost the metrics that you are currently gold on as a social media manager because you're getting a lot more engagement, right? We essentially sold that as this like consultative plan, and got them used to this idea of, hey, like using DMs to collect emails and like sell product and all that sort of stuff. And that was one of the really interesting ways that we kind of maybe conveyed the value of our platform to people who weren't necessarily ready for it.
I see. I'm curious, did you ever doubt your vision?
Oh, even now I do, right?
Tell me
Oftentimes
about it.
I feel like you're you're kind of feeling around in a dark room for a doorknob, right? And it's this huge room, and like, you know, you essentially try to make you feel around and you make educated guesses as to whether you're going in the right decision, whether you're going to reach that doorknob. And the crazy thing is that it's a moving doorknob, right? Like with a startup, it's always this like moving target. You don't really know exactly always what you're trying to accomplish at the end, right? A company is a like a living, breathing thing, and obviously we have goals and we have expectations, but those things change quarter to quarter, month to month, right? Um, so I'm glad we're growing, right? We're seeing a ton of growth, and that's always good. That's always a good sign. That means we're doing our job,
Always.
right? But also I think about, hey, like what is the end state of this company? If there is one, right? And are we really going in the direction in which we're able to kind of fulfill that end state, right? So yeah, I'm always kind of even today doubting the vision of Scrollmark, if that makes sense.
What motivates you to push through those moments?
I think, I once heard this from at a party, right? Which was in the Valley, in the Silicon Valley. A a failed founder is gonna see more success than a successful engineer, right? And I I've kind of seen that obviously in the last 2 or 3 years, right? There's so much I've learned about the way a company is run, the way that, products are made and sold. Um, and I think just that desire to maybe like continue along that journey, because obviously the further along you go, the more you're going to find out and the more effective you're going to be, not just in this job, but later in my career, right? That's kind of pushed me personally. Now, obviously, the part that I don't like about that quote is a failed founder, right? Like, obviously, I want this company to, it's hard to define success when it comes to a company, but I want this company to be successful, right? Because I'm sure that a successful founder can definitely achieve more than a failed founder. But I think, oftentimes got to remind myself that, hey, most companies that start fail, right? Obviously,
They
I'm
do.
not trying to be that, but that doesn't necessarily mean um, that the entire experience was a failure personally, right?
Yeah, there's lots to learn, and I think that's what at least I look at going through life is what can I learn that I can build on and use. I don't ever stop learning.
All right.
It's important to me. Who were your mentors? You have mentors that along your journey?
Yeah, no, I think there's a ton of mentors like big and small, right? I think obviously we were very selective with the investors. And I think, one of our investors, Patrick, and the other one, Greg, both kind of started companies in this marketing space and therefore have a lot of, obviously the companies that they started were many years ago and things have changed, but a lot of the principles of the business remain the same. And they're able to kind of give advice and have us kind of be focused more on that end state and the way to get there that we often kind of like miss while working the day to day, right? But a lot of kind of the smaller mentors have been like people I've kind of met maybe once, maybe twice, maybe three times, and they've just kind of been helpful cheerleaders. Like the whole idea of like it takes a village, right? Like this idea that, hey, like, people who see that you're doing something cool and help you along, right? Like I actually in my co-founders building, there's another founder who, this is his second time starting a company. He's been very successful in his current company. And he gave me a ton of advice on um, how to think about early customer adoption and um, how to kind of grow your team in a way that's sensible, right? There's Dawn Dobras. She used to be she's a friend actually of my family's and is an investor herself, but isn't invested in my company. But she's treated this company as if she's invested in the company. She's been
Yeah,
really
yes,
helpful.
yes.
Um, she kind of invites me to a ton of places where, I might meet potential customers or partners. Um, Gives me a ton of advice on kind of the state of the business and how to kind of push that forward, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of people I've just kind of met in daily life who've just kind of been helpful and have a lot of knowledge to impart and have been kind of open with that.
yeah, it's the best. I think as we learn and grow, and just like I think when we're successful and do well, we have a responsibility to give back in some way.
All right.
And sharing our wisdom is important. Let's shift a little bit to building and scaling. I'm curious. What was a big turning point in Scrollmark? What was that like when you like, okay, yeah, we got over a hurdle here. What was that about?
It's funny. I think I remember I was playing sorry, football, and like it was like a Sunday. I was playing football in like a field with like a bunch of my friends, right? And I take a look at my phone, and like there's like we have this like channel on Slack that just like basically like bugs or anything, anytime something kind of breaks, like an alerting channel from engineering, and it was just going haywire, right? Um and I kind of left the football game and started to like look into it. And there's this company called Cozy Earth, like one of our customers who was like doing a giveaway, kind of running that strategy. Um, and they got something like 10,000 comments, and they were collecting something like 7, 8,000 emails. And this is in the matter of hours. And obviously, it's not a huge scale, right? If I'm being honest, but ultimately, we did not build our system to scale because we're like, let's get to market quickly, then we'll figure out scale. And that was kind of a moment where I was like, all right, looks like we're gonna start to see from this point onwards a lot more volume in our product. We got to think about scale, right? So that was kind of this like weird moment where the platform broke, but you were kind of happy it broke. You're like, all right, like
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
so
sometimes when things blow up, it's a good thing. That
yeah,
always doesn't mean it,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that story. What was it like securing funding? We have people listening to this that will learn from what you're sharing today, and I'm curious when you were not only funding, when you were looking to secure first customers, even and even just people to support you. Tell us something about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about relationship building, right? I think the a funny story here is that like the investor who ended up leading our like pre-seed round, I quit my job in April of 2022. I met him in like May of 2022, and I emailed him basically every month from May, June, July, August, never responded. Never responded. And finally, um, he responded in like October, and he's like, let's meet. And within, I think it was within 5 or 6 days, we had a term sheet, right? So,
Yeah,
it would have been easy after the third or fourth or fifth time he didn't respond to my email for me to kind of give up. But the persistence kind of paid off there. Um, with customers, it was the same thing, right? I think it was the early sale, like no, again, nobody really wants to be the first. Early sales have to be kind of relationship based. Like, and this is not like an industry, like it's not like I had a lot of pre-existing relationships with like CMOs, but a lot of it was like kind of me reaching out, being like, hey, you know, here's a little bit about me. Everybody kind of wants to buy, they don't want to buy products, they want to buy from other people, right? Like, being a little bit personal, telling them a little bit about who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, why I think they would care about this. Like something, obviously a little bit of flattery help goes a long way, right? A little bit about why I want to reach out to them. And most of them didn't respond, if I'm being honest, right? Some of them did. And we developed a relationship, before I was ready to sell to them. And then, when the time for that sale came, again, not all of those that I had developed a relationship with would buy, but some of them would, right? Um, in terms of investors, I think what I found really helpful, and this is again something I mentioned earlier, is kind of always thinking about and talking about what the end state looks like, right? Like trying to draw a picture of, hey, like what can this company look like in 5 or 10 years? And why does this thing that we're building now like matter, right? Like oftentimes I think the empathy goes a long way, right? Like put yourself in the shoes of an investor and you're trying to kind of determine who's going to be, the next Steph Curry by looking at a class of like preschoolers, right? It's a very difficult thing to do. Like if you take a class of preschoolers and you're like, hey, who's going to be the next Steph Curry? Like, who knows, right? Like it really depends on like a lot of things that could happen. And you can make guesses, right? But you know, you're never gonna be right on all of them, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think the biggest thing that you can do is tell the story of, hey, like how can this like little like like child of a company go to being this amazing thing, right? And the better you can kind of tell that story and get people to buy into the vision, um, the more successful you're going to be with fundraising, right? I think like, I think that also kind of makes sense because if you have that clear vision and you can really draw that out, that gives investors more confidence that you can actually execute on it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, you bring up a good question with 5 years. Where do you see Scrollmark in 5 years?
that's a good question. I think there's like two answers, right? One is more kind of uh quantitative, right? Which is that I want to be competing with really the giants in the social space in one way or another, right? Like, there's and doesn't mean the Facebooks and the Instagrams, but more on the social marketing space. So companies like Hootsuite and Sprout Social and Sprinkler and all that sort of stuff, right? But I think on the other side, um, a lot of what we're trying to do doesn't actually directly compete with those companies, right? I think about like one of my big inspirations, even though, never met him, is Dharmesh from HubSpot, right? Who kind of, coined like almost a new term inbound marketing, right? And I wanna do something like that with Scrollmark. Really like,
I see.
you know, change the way that marketing is done today on social, right? Because if we can do that successfully, right, then that means that obviously the success as a company will come, right? Yeah.
There you go. We all have to look at how we balance innovation with sustainability, how much we're going to invest in the new and growing and how we maintain and make sure we keep the lights on and pay the payroll. Um, Tell me what principles you use. How do you balance those two things?
I think in an early startup, um, there's obviously there's a personal side of this, but from a business perspective, I think growth matters a lot more than sustainability of that growth. I think when it comes, and this again, this differs business to business, right? But if you're thinking about a venture funded technology company, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? You hear about these companies that like these 500-year-old like small businesses from Japan passed down from generation to generation, right? Um, I personally don't believe there will ever be any technology startups like that. There will not be any startups like or companies 500 years in the future that are like small family-owned technology companies. So what that means is that especially at an early stage, it's grow, 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 right? Because if you're not growing, then you're dying. Now obviously, I think on the flip side, there's a sustainability from the fact that, ultimately companies are made up of people, right? And, we want to be in it for the long haul. Me and Nikhil, my co-founder, but also the people that are on the team, we want them to be with us and on the team in the long haul, right? So, startups are tough, right? Like you're working long hours, but we want to make sure that you have the flexibility to like do whatever you need to do in your personal life, and also for us to be able to do whatever we need to do in our personal life, that we kind of take care of, you know, our personal relationships and our health and all that sort of stuff. So, that ultimately, I think we try to lean on each other, like to try to find the right balance there. Um, but ultimately, everybody has to kind of make their own decisions on, hey, when they need to pull back a little bit and when they can invest a little bit more in the business.
Yeah, yes, yes, I agree. Um, I'm interested. What, if you can share it with us, what's your next big opportunity you're working on, you're focused on?
Yeah, I think the next big opportunity we're working on is actually social listening, right? Social listening is really the practice of kind of trying to see what people are saying, both about your brand, but also about adjacent kind of topics on social, both so that you know you have kind of competitive and brand research that you can kind of bring back to the rest of the marketing team, but also so that you can kind of craft more content to go viral on social that people really want to see and listen to and all that sort of stuff. And I think social listening has been around for now 10 or 15 years. It's a very old industry, but I think we're coming out with some innovative tools to make it really easy to do social listening, right? Like one of the things that we've heard when we talk to social media managers is that, hey, like setting up social listening dashboards can take something like 10, 20, 30 hours, right? And sometimes, you get the tools, but like just because you have the right tools doesn't mean you can do the right social listening. Also, I think social listening has gotten more difficult because, um, previously most posts on social were either image or text. So it's really easy to understand what's actually happening in a specific post, what it's about. As we move to video, um, you know, a lot of people they post a video, they're not even putting a caption, they're not even putting hashtags, right? Um, so actually pulling in, like, even though your tool may have a post about your brand, if the brand name was only mentioned on video, like they may not actually be sending that to you, right? So I think there's a lot of innovation to be done with social listening.
Oh,
Um, Something that we're working on in our suite of tools today.
excellent. I'm sure we all look forward to learning more about that and these opportunities as grow. I've been talking to some of my clients lately, and I'm hearing a message I just want to toss out to you to see what you think about it. I'm talking to a lot of tech people that have children, and with the evolution of AI, which is clearly here and growing and not going away, they're concerned that their kids might lose the smarts they need to get by because it's so easy just to type, I need this or show me this. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think that, there's always been kind of a panic from a previous generation about how is the next generation gonna get by. Like, I was probably one of the last crop of students to ever learn how to write in cursive, right? Like, I don't think students know how to write in cursive anymore, unless you're really doing it for like artistic and calligraphy reasons, right? Um, so, when the calculator came out, that was like a huge, hey, like you can use a graphing calculator to just graph, do you really need to learn go to geometry or calculus class anymore? Like, how are they going to learn these concepts, right? Ultimately, I think as technology changes, right? The the needs of kind of the people creating the technology also become greater, right? if we think about somebody 40 years ago versus somebody now who's working the same job, you have to have like a lot more skills today to kind of, get the same job and accomplish the same things, right? Than you did 40 years ago. And that's also because you have a lot more tools than somebody did 40 years ago, right? Like the research that it would have taken somebody 40 years ago, 40 hours to do, you can do in 40 minutes, right? Um, so I think there are concerns, right? I think a lot of maybe like median level employees at um in companies doing a lot of intellectual work, it's going to be hard for you to maybe like it may be hard for you to pick up these new AI skills in a way that helps you really accomplish your job. There is reason for concern, but I don't think I'm ready to write off an entire generation
Yes.
um because of AI, right? Like I think they will use AI as a tool and eventually, make us look like dinosaurs, right? Like, because that's what every generation has done so far, right? So there's no reason to say that the trend won't continue.
Yeah, I predict we're going to see a surge in creativity, empathy, even leadership, and things that require a human touch that
Right.
the machine still can't do. Maybe one day, but not yet. Share with us, there are people that are going to watch this that are thinking about founding a company or embarking on something new. You certainly have done that in your career so far. What would be the piece of advice you would give to somebody thinking about launching their own company?
I would say that only do it if you'll be you'll be happy even if it fails, right? Um, if you're if you're if you're starting a company with everyone starts a company with the expectation it's going to be successful. Let's start there, right? Like, nobody's starting a company with the expectation it's going to fail. But ultimately, if you're not going to find joy in the process and the work that's going to go into it, which is a lot, um, you're probably not even going to be successful, right? So if you're looking to start a company, you got to say like win or lose, this is something that I got to do, right? And if you have and that kind of intrinsic motivation can come from a lot of places, right? It can come from a deep a deep passion for the space you're building in or for the product you're building or for the solution you're building. It can come from like an empathy for the people you're doing it with, right? It can even come from a a place of ambition in terms of being a founder, right? I've seen it in many ways, right? But everyone I've seen who's been a founder, who's kind of like who's done well, or even if they haven't necessarily done well in terms of the company being successful, have done well personally, have you can see that there was a real deep passion about something, right? And that they couldn't be held down from starting that company, even if somebody told them that, hey, it's not going to work, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Good advice. Akshay, thank you for being here on Open Pathways today. It's really been a great experience talking to you. I'm sure that our listeners are going to really enjoy hearing what you've had to say today. So thank you for being here. And I want to encourage everyone to know this is Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble. And today we had Akshay Madhani with us today from Scrollmark. Check out Scrollmark, and we'll see you again next time.